Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Krishna, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll be reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 17, Text 10. And we ask for your warm wishes, blessings. We could try to receive something from the Srimad Bhagavatam, although I have no ability. The Bhagavatam is very powerful, so we'll be praying that something can come. Today is, text 10. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Minam sudukhitam drishtva dinan mina patohate. Kripaya sobhari praha tatratya kshemam acharan. Minan sudukhitan drishtva dinan mina patohate. Kripaya sobhari praha Tatratyakshamam acharan. Minan sudukhitan drishtva dinan mina patohate. Kripaya sobhari praha Tatratyakshamam acharan. Minan, the fish. Sudukhitan, most unhappy. Drishtva, seeing. Dina, wretched. Mina pato, the lord of the fish. Hate, being killed. Kripaya, out of compassion. Sobharihi, Sobhari, Praha, spoke. Tatratya, for those living there. Kshemam, the welfare. Acharan, trying to enact. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, the servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Seeing how the unfortunate fish in that lake had become most unhappy at the death of their leader, Subhari uttered the following curse under the impression that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the lake's residents. Purport. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that when our so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord, it merely causes a disturbance. Because Sobhari had forbidden Garuda's coming to that lake, Kaliya moved in and made his headquarters there, and this spelled doom for all the lake's residents. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll read the translation again. Seeing how the unfortunate fish in that lake had become most unhappy at the death of their leader, Subhari uttered the following curse under the impression that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the lake's residents. That he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the lake's residents. So this is the 10th canto where we get to hear the most potent pastimes of Krishna. It's taken us many years. I think when I first started coming to this temple, we were on the 4th canto. That was in 2011. So that 8 years. And that's taking it 1-2 verses a day. The idea is that we become qualified to hear with realization the 10th canto. That actually we have to grow in our adhikar. We can hear something, but the type of shravanam, this Bhagavat shravanam that we hear the glories about, is when it's heard with the realization, when it's heard with the proper sambandha. So any one of Krishna's pastimes is actually so powerful that it can elevate the soul. We hear there these 5 most potent forms of devotional service, one of which is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So when these are performed without offense, then immediately one can awaken to Krishna consciousness. And Krishna consciousness is divine stage. We are practicing Krishna consciousness, but we can't very truthfully or honestly say we are Krishna conscious. We're trying to be Krishna conscious. So the 10th canto is like that most potent medicine out of the whole Bhagavatam. It's described as the smiling face of Krishna. When we take darshan, we start at the lotus feet and we gradually go up, but somehow or other our attention gets stuck, it gets caught on the face of Krishna. And sometimes we don't want to go anywhere else after that. But certainly the Bhagavatam, when we come to the 10th canto, the glories of the Bhagavatam, especially for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they continually glorify 10th canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam, because of this 10th canto. That's the unique glory, because there's many other scriptures, there's many other Puranas, there's many other accounts. But hearing the way that Krishna lives, his pastimes, his friends, his home, all these things have the potency to inject within us the remembrance of our own home, our own friends, family, in a real sense. In the material world, we have our material family, but actually in the spiritual world, we have our real family, we can say. So the bewilderment that comes through Maya convinces us that everything in this material world, your temporary situation, that's your eternal situation. And so all the suffering is brought about because of that misdirected attachment. And in the life of Sobhari Muni, we see that he also got a little carried away. He got carried away in his practice, and the Acharyas mentioned the reason for that was actually a Vaishnava aparad. But he was also practicing as we were practicing, and he happened to get a little diverted, as we said, by this misdirected attachment. The soul needs some attachment. It needs some affection. I've been realizing more and more how affection is like this double-ended sword. On the one hand, it can bring us to perfection, and on the other hand, it keeps us bound up life after life in the material world when it's misdirected. So much so that we don't want to go back to Godhead. And there's no greater obstacle than not actually wanting to go back to Godhead, right? It's mentioned that to consider something as more important than one's spiritual perfection, that's the greatest anartha. So affection is such that consciously or unconsciously we become attached to individuals who may not be on that spiritual platform, the healthy state of existence for the soul. And then we don't want to go. Our whole process to awaken intense desire to go. By dint of the desire, we'll go there. But when there's attachment for the temporary or for individuals whom we've not developed the spiritual quality of detachment, that will check that desire. And rather than within our heart this increasing awakening, we become entrapped. We think, yeah, that's okay, but... So at every stage, in the beginning, middle, and in the end, we have to constantly check our affection and our affinity. And is this spiritually uplifting me, or is this keeping me attached to the material world? So Subhari Muni, he was doing his bhajan, he was doing his meditation, his practice underwater for a long time. And this pastime teaches us so many things, that a moment's inattention can derail one. There's a nice purport that Prabhupada explains where this pastime is given in the 9th canto. The translation of the 9th canto, chapter 6, text 49 reads, "Thereafter, one day, while Sobari Muni, who was expert in chanting mantras, was sitting in a secluded place, he thought," oh, this was actually, I'm sorry, after, when he's reflecting on his fall down, "he thought to himself about the cause of his fall down, which was simply that he had associated himself with the sexual affairs of the fish." So we hear again and again that this spiritual path is like a razor's edge. Does anyone remember that verse from the Upanishads? Durgam patastad kavayo vadanti, kshurasya dara nishita duratiya. This utishta jagrata pratyavara nibodat, kshurasya dara nishita duratiya, durgam patastad kavayo vadanti. The learned people say that this spiritual path is like a razor's edge. But you've come to this human form of life. You have to utilize that boon. But you have to be careful. So even the slight inattention, and we hear also from Ajamil, the pastime. And so in the Gita, the very beginning, after Krishna explains the nature of who we are, we're the soul, immediately he starts talking about the nature of sense control. I was just reading this in a Gita. We were describing the Gita. And in that second chapter, after Krishna's explained the nature, the very first thing is the nature of the soul, and then what is the process of purification? And he explains, therefore, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. We were hearing last night about this importance of the buddhi, the intelligence. And Prabhupada mentions here that how one has to curb these senses, that one whose senses, just as a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses upon which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. So even a Jamil we have, he just saw some, it's like he went out in Rogers Park. He walked home from the CTA to the temple. That's all he did. But he fell down from his Brahminical. He became the very most degraded. And so this is just your average day in Chicago, right? You just look outside. We're getting exposed to that like all day long. He just saw it for 1 second. So how much we have to really inoculate ourselves. But we become used to it. Yeah, this is life. It's 2019, and every successive generation, they grew up with more and more degradation. So we think we're aloof. We think, yeah, no big deal. It's not that bad. There's worse places. But no, the contamination out there these days, when you study it from the perspective of Bhagavatam, you see this is actually very low. It's a very dangerous situation, actually. And we're just habituated to it, so we think, no big deal. But the point is that controlling the senses, we shouldn't unnecessarily just absorb ourselves in all these bizarre phenomena going on in the material world. Even one train, you go on one train ride, how many just bizarre things you're going to come across in Kaliya? You're going to so many strange people and conversations and ads. So the Gita is reminding us, hey, control your senses, You don't have to look and observe everything that's going on in Kali Yuga. It's not really going to help you. So by controlling the senses is one important point. But the real reason of Sobari Muni's downfall is a little bit deeper. And that is explained, we'll hear in the next text, how because of his offense, yeah, that was mentioned previously. The curse he utters is that if Garuda comes here, he will die. So this was actually the mistake Sobari Muni made, and that came from this feeling of wanting to protect the unfortunate fish, and that's the verse today. seeing how the unfortunate fish had become most unhappy, he tried to utter a curse under the impression that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of others. So Prabhupada, or the disciples of Prabhupada, say that so-called compassion that does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord is merely causes a disturbance. And this is mentioned by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. When our so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord, it's merely a disturbance. So we have that tendency for compassion and affection. But if that's not in line with Krishna's formula, then that creates a disturbance. And in our own lives, our particular service that we have, we may feel, I'm feeling munificent today. I'm going to just do something totally different because I'm in a charitable mood. But if that's not our prescribed service, if that's not what Krishna wants from us, then it's going to be a disturbance in our devotional life. So to try to really keep in mind and be guided very carefully as to what is our function by the spiritual master, the devotees, the Vaishnavas. Otherwise, we can get a little damaged, we get a little tossed around, and it can be very serious also. In Subari Muni's case, that tendency ended up causing a great offense, or he fell down from his spiritual practice. Interestingly, it's mentioned that later on he did rectify himself after a long spell of enjoyment and family, a wide family. He took vanaprastha. He went to the forest, and ultimately he achieved perfection. And that's mentioned by the Acharyas because he had taken shelter of the Yamuna, that he was doing his bhajan in Yamuna, so ultimately he was delivered. That's the power of the Yamuna. So we also see some other examples of this. We see Arjuna's so-called compassion for his kinsmen. You might think this is great quality, this is good, but no, that was not what Krishna wanted. That did not tally with the Lord's direction. And also I was thinking we see in the case of Bali Maharaj, whom we are speaking about this month for our Sunday feast, that he was advised by his guru to don't surrender to Krishna. Don't surrender to Lord Vishnu. But that instruction from Shukracharya was not what the Lord wanted. That was his own sense of for the daityas, for the demons. You should not do this. You'll lose it for us. But that's a misplaced sentiment. Actually, Krishna's purpose has to be fulfilled at all costs. And also we see followers of Buddha. Buddha actually, his mission was to stop the animal sacrifices for compassion for the animals. But nowadays, if people are not actually theologically oriented, then what is the real value of their compassion? It's still on a material platform. So nowadays there's so many groups of compassionate activities, but without Krishna in the picture, I don't know if it's a disturbance or it's just incomplete. It's not going to actually have the real benefit that it is available to the human beings, rather which is found in the Shastra, especially Srimad Bhagavatam. So even hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, reading, sharing, and distributing Bhagavatam is a much superior form of compassion, right? And that compassion is going to go to the soul. And that's going to help others wake up, as we said, to this original home, this original reality that that we're a part of, and we are in our dream of ego, and we can protect others, and we can be independent. So the Bhagavatam will help clear that misconception. Those are a few thoughts I had today. Let's see if there's any question or comment. Okay, Harisha.
Thank you, Acharya Prabhu. You touched upon this theme of affection and how affection is a double-edged sword. And so one has a need for it, but if one overdoes it or doesn't do it properly, then it can lead to perhaps an unfortunate position in one's devotional service. I was wondering if you could speak just a little bit more about this. Affection is such an intangible quality. It's not like measuring rounds or how much time you spent doing something, or it's not like money where you can count it. It's something much subtler than that. It's a need every individual has, and depending on the individual, some more, some less. Perhaps if a person grew up with very loving parents, maybe as an adult they feel more secure. It's just an interesting like concept you brought out based on this passion of Sabari Muni, and I don't have like a perfect question structured, but I'd like to hear some more thoughts on how does one, you say, move through the devotional life, with friends and relatives and loved ones, satisfying one's need for affection, but not losing track of one's ultimate purpose.
The interesting thing is that, um, well, you said that it may vary, people meet differing levels of affection. But I would say that the soul, it's a need of the soul. I don't think it so much depends. Now, they may not be able to realize that they're needing that. But all the souls will need similar amount of affection. It's not that some souls, so that is a need, love, we can say. But sometimes that can be covered, and we might reject that, like, no, I don't want that, I don't need that. But that doesn't mean that that need is not still there. In other words, some may be more in touch or in tune with that. But the interesting thing I find is that it really depends on in whom it's reposed, in terms of how it will benefit us or how it will degrade us. So, taking that need and taking the process of bhakti, the encouragement is that you put that affection on the sadhus. When we put that affection in advanced devotees, we'll actually get more in that relationship, right? Sometimes you're giving, but you just don't seem to be getting something back. It also depends how much one can reciprocate. In other words, affection, unless it's on the spiritual platform, it's not really going to satisfy us. It's not really going to give us what we're looking for. Only the real spiritual affection will nourish us. In the material world, so many people are affectionate to each other. Doesn't mean they're really getting satisfied. In fact, they're wanting, it never ends. It's never satiated. They want more and more. They want more and more partners, more and more friends, but they're not getting it. But in a spiritual relationship, that type of affection that can be exchanged because it's in relation with Krishna, it's actually going to satisfy us. Because Krishna is in the center. It's going to help us develop devotion for Krishna. So I would say reposing that, when we can repose that in one or two or a few deep devotees, then we'll feel actually very satisfied. You with me? Then we'll actually feel like we're getting what we need, rather than trying to put it here and there in so many places and still feeling a little empty inside. So one powerful devotee, if you develop that intimate relationship, then you can get everything. Those are some angles. I invite anyone else to offer an answer also, if anyone would like to. That's some thoughts on it. Subhavu?
I find it very sort of fascinating in one sense. The focus of the purport in terms of this compassion, because appears to be, like obvious. There's all these preachers suffering, and something that appears to be, like an unfair action towards, peace, regular peaceful creatures who were just living there, and then here comes Garuda to harass them and create this terrible situation and panic and confusion. So obviously, it's a natural thing that one feels for, but the fact is that it created something even worse, not only for the inhabitants of the lake, but also for himself also. So it's interesting that, and then what the Acharya Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that that when it's devoid of Krishna, as you mentioned also in your presentation, in your class, when Krishna is not in the picture, when you don't tally the order of Krishna, then it's a disaster. So then it comes to the question of this mundane morality that we hear often, in discussions in Srila Prabhupada's teaching. And also, similar to Arjuna, one of the Arjuna's distressing, or the five, confusions, or what is it, dilemmas that he had, was one of them was compassion. And Krishna chastised him, as you're talking, you're thinking, you're talking like a learned person, but you're actually a fool. So Krishna dismissed it, because the point of being approaching this whole thing, all these different morally sound things that Arjuna is bringing up, and in this case Sobari Muni, they're morally sound, but they're from the perspective of bodily concept of life, from not, on not having a deeper understanding. So in one sense, to sometimes for us it may be very difficult to understand the Krishna's arrangements for a particular community or society or things like that. That it appears that, oh my God, what's going on? This is not good. Suppose in our own society, in ISKCON, we have gone to some quite a ride, upside downs. There were sometimes that appears that everything was sometimes going very wrong. Krishna's arrangement, but then to try to come up with all these different solutions that not necessarily tallies the order of Krishna, then it create all these disasters. So one have to be very, very um, um, observant and careful about it, especially understanding. Sometimes we may not understand Krishna's arrangement. We may not understand Krishna's representative's arrangement, like Garuda in this case. But we have to be very careful, have faith that Krishna is in control, and take shelter on advanced devotees to understand better the situation, right, than to jump to conclusions and come with solutions. So, some thoughts on that, if you.
Yeah, thank you. It reminds me of this one sentence that I didn't read, but after describing this offense, Prabhupada says, Sobari Muni certainly committed a great offense to a Vaishnava. Because of this, he fell from his exalted position of mystic tapasya. One should not therefore impede the activities of a Vaishnava. This is the lesson we must learn from this incident concerning Sobari Muni. So yeah, we may not always know their plan or their objective or their position, but to interfere, with a great devotee is always a calamity.
Thank you. When we talking about compassion, we necessarily have to talk about empathy and tolerance and other virtues that when we are facing in a particular moment, when we need to respond to somebody's needs, the only thing that we have to feel is some sort of happiness and gratitude, because I think that Krishna have heard, God have heard the prayers of somebody that is in need and put us in the position to help and to respond for him and to meet that person's needs. But we do not take it seriously or with responsibility. No. We sometimes feel like knowing a lot of Sanskrit or shlokas and about of the etiquette is enough, but we do not respond to a certain situation when we have feuds and contradictions with others. We respond like carnivores, not like Vaishnavas. No, we respond to the guy that got us in the street. I do it myself. No, no, and start cursing, rolling the window, and say, "Ugh." No, it's that we need to. Is what this verse, this shloka, eats on me right now.
What was that last sentence?
No, I was appreciate. I appreciate this slogan and what you said. That is what
Yeah, this is actually the Vaishnav culture is the servant of the servant, serving not Krishna directly, but the devotees, and facilitating their service to Krishna. What's the best way we can help a devotee? Help facilitate their service, because that is their life and soul. But I appreciate your point of how sometimes we do get too philosophical. We don't want to get, sometimes when there's austerity, there can be a dry, from too much austerity, actually the heart can get hard. So we need to perform the process that Prabhupada's given and be open to the needs of others. That's a big concept, even in the Christian, responsive to the needs of others, as is in our capacity and within our service again, which is within our guided service, because we have a variety of services, and that which is given by our authorities and by our spiritual master, to follow that is always auspicious for us. Thank you.
All right, Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your class. You made a lot of wonderful points. You were mentioning the Ajamil pastime. I really appreciate that we're seeing that you only saw it briefly, but we're seeing it on a daily basis, so we can become lats in our Krishna consciousness. But generally speaking, when I first hear the phrase, when Prabhupada always used the phrase, control your senses, generally speaking, if you ask anyone, I would think most of us would say control your senses means to control your lust, like that Ajamil pastime. But we see that if you, you can control your lust, but you may not be able to control your envy or your vengeance or your pride, like Durvasa Muni, he was a renunciate. I'll share one of my favorite verses. It's connected with the Sobari Muni pastime too. You could say this is from 5th Canto, chapter 1, verse 7. I think it's 7 or 17. So it basically says, even if a person is a renunciate who travels from forest to forest, he must always fear material bondage because he is married to six co-wives, the mind and five senses. On the other hand, even a householder life cannot harm a self-satisfied person who's divorced from Maya. So we see that in the Rasamuni pastime, although he was a renunciate, he was married to Maya. On the flip side of the coin, although Ambarish was a householder, he was divorced from Maya. Same thing that Gita says, Mamaivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manashishtani indriyani prakriti stani karshati. It says that we're all struggling, karshati, with what? How to divorce the mind and five senses. It's not easy to divorce thoughts like, I really hate that guy. He gets on my nerve. It's not so easy just by chanting Hare Krishna, accepting and renunciate. So my question is regarding one point you were making, advanced devotees. You were mentioning who is an advanced devotee. We should develop attachment for advanced devotee. And then Srila Prabhupada and Leelamrita, this subject matter was discussed. There's a chapter called India, Unifying ISKCON. And in that chapter, there was arguments going on between the Sannyasi, Prabhupada Sannyasi disciples and the Grihastas. And the Sannyasis were criticizing the Grihastas. Oh, Prabhupada, I don't think, they could be, leaders in our movement because they're married. And Prabhupada quoted a verse, Kiba Vipra Kiva Nyasi Suja Kene Noi, Ye Krishna Tapa Veta Seguda Hoy. Anyone who knows the science of Krishna, who's divorced from their false ego, who's always respecting others, appreciating that person is advanced. It doesn't matter what ashram you are. And so finally, Prabhupada handled this issue. He kind of emphasized his point, but there was one pastime with one sannyasi. I never heard of him. I'm not going to mention his name, but I've never heard of him in the movement. But he finally tried to one last lick, you could say, to criticize the householders to Prabhupada. And so he says, Prabhupada, how is it that during the Sachi Gopal pastime, this Brahmana, if he was so pure, why did he make this Sachi Gopal deity come to see his wedding? Come all the way out, why did he make the Lord come? And so Prabhupada was like, oh, okay, okay. So Prabhupada says, he says, just because no woman wanted you, you say that nobody should get married. And everyone started laughing. He was like, that's the psychology. No woman, you're feeling rejected, so you say nobody should get married. So my question is, this is a very broad question, who's an advanced devotee? Because, we see that, we make operas by criticizing according to our preconceived notions. Who's an advanced devotee? So
The main quality of the devotee is their speech. Prabhupada encouraged that you can't see a devotee. You can't even observe. You can't see by their activities. Even the demigods are bewildered by the activities of the devotee. But by their speech, by hearing from them, by hearing from someone, you get a sense of what is the content of their mind. We can't hide our state of consciousness when we speak with others. So by hearing from devotees, we can recognize for ourselves, this is someone that is benefiting my consciousness. I'm becoming uplifted by this interaction, by this association, by hearing from this person. So Prabhupada said you can hear, you can't see the devotee, but you can hear the devotee. And the speech is the most important quality of any person. So by hearing from them, we can get a sense of this will be very beneficial for me. Thank you all very much. I'll stop here for today. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Gaur Premanand.